Some people don't feel overwhelmed, they feel flat, not sad enough to cry, just quietly untouched by life. You may still function, but inside there's a question. Why don't I feel anything anymore? This isn't apathy. It's the nervous system conserving after too much unmet feeling. This is functional freeze. Nothing is wrong with you. Your system adapted to survive. Functional freeze can look like independence or competence, so it's rarely recognised for what it is. But underneath the stillness, there's often a history of reaching that didn't lead to being met. In this state, connection can feel effortful. Messages go unanswered, invitations feel heavy. Being known feels like too much work for too little in return, not because the desire isn't there, but because the nervous system is tired of reaching into empty space. Functional freeze does not always look like collapse. Often it looks like a life that is technically working. People in functional freeze go to work, maintain relationships, respond to messages and fulfill responsibilities. So from the outside, nothing appears wrong, yet inside, there is a persistent sense of standing slightly outside of life, watching rather than inhabiting, participating without fully arriving. Functional freeze is not a personality trait. It is a nervous system state. It is often early relational, protective, and deeply embodied, which is why motivation doesn't cure it, productivity doesn't cure it, positive thinking doesn't cure it. Being surrounded by people doesn't resolve it. Sometimes it intensifies it. Functional freeze isn't a lack of motivation, and it isn't a character flaw. It's not that you don't care. It's that caring once came with cost, when effort didn't lead to relief, when hope led to disappointment. The nervous system learned to step back, not because it gave up, but because conserving felt safer than reaching. Nothing is wrong with you. This is what happens when the body has carried too much for too long without support. Functional freeze doesn't always look like distress. It often looks like coping. You show up, you manage, you get things done. From the outside, nothing appears wrong, but inside, there is a quiet disconnection, a sense of being present without being here. Because functional freeze is not collapse, it's containment, a nervous system staying steady by keeping feeling at a distance. And because it works, it often goes unnoticed, even by the person living right inside it. In functional freeze, the nervous system decides reaching hurts too much, hoping takes too much energy, wanting risks disappointment. So instead of moving toward connection, the body conserves. Loneliness doesn't vanish, it flattens, quieter, heavier, harder to name. Functional freeze doesn't remove the ache, it dulls it enough to survive. Perhaps the most invisible strategy of functional freeze is the quiet sacrifice of aliveness. This is where safety is preserved by minimizing desire, expression, and emotional movement. You feel less than you do. You want less than you once did. You stay neutral where you were once alive. You stay contained where you were once responsive. Life continues, but from a careful distance. Nothing is overtly wrong, but nothing is fully here. And over time, something devastating happens. You are functioning, but you are no longer fully inhabiting yourself. Achievement can mask it. Caretaking can hide it. Spirituality can bypass it. Even growth can sometimes outrun it. But what we are often organising around is not preference, it's protection. And the more efficiently we build lives that don't require us to feel, the less opportunity the nervous system has to learn that feeling is no longer dangerous. The tragedy of functional freeze is that it convinces us we are fine, Life may be full, but it rarely feels inhabited. There can be relationships without resonance, success without satisfaction, movement without arrival. So we try to fix the wrong thing. We change partners, we move homes, we seek purpose, we optimize habits, we search for meaning. And when none of it quite touches the flatness or the distance underneath, we assume the problem is us. But functional freeze does not resolve through rearranging life. It softens when the nervous system is given something it did not have before: safe, regulated, emotionally present connection. Freeze is not sustained by trauma alone. It is sustained by the absence of new experience. Every time we override the body's signals with productivity, positivity, or performance, we confirm the original learning that it is safer not to feel. Every time we pathologize our distance instead of listening to it, the system tightens. Every time we chase stimulation to escape the quiet, we teach the body that stillness is dangerous. And so, functional freeze becomes not just a state, but a life organised around not arriving. Functional freeze often begins when a child learns that feeling doesn't lead to comfort and reaching doesn't bring relief. When support is inconsistent, unavailable, or conditional, the child adapts, not by needing less, but by going quieter inside. That early intelligence stays in the nervous system and is often the inner child saying it was safer not to feel too much. Functional freeze often forms when emotional expression didn't lead to comfort. Needs were minimized, delayed, or ignored. Support was inconsistent or conditional. Reaching carried the risk of disappointment or withdrawal. Over time, the nervous system learned something precise. Feeling costs energy, and energy must be conserved. So instead of reaching outward, the system learned to hold inward. Functional freeze isn't a sudden shutdown. It's the accumulation of moments where feeling didn't feel safe enough to continue. Functional freeze is not a malfunction, it's an adaptation. When effort didn't lead to change and expression didn't bring relief, the nervous system adjusted, not by giving up, but by conserving. This state allows you to keep going without burning out or breaking down. Functional freeze kept things stable when instability felt too costly, and that matters. Over time, the nervous system learned it's safer to conserve than to hope, safer to stay contained than to risk disappointment, safer to keep functioning than to feel fully. So it adapted, not by shutting down completely, but by staying operational without opening. This is how functional freeze becomes familiar, not because life stopped, but because the body learned to survive by staying just far enough away from feeling. Functional freeze doesn't persist because you're not trying hard enough. It persists because the nervous system hasn't yet learned that effort will be met differently now. If reaching once led to disappointment, the body stays cautious even when circumstances change. So freeze remains, not out of stubbornness, but out of learned protection. The system is waiting for evidence, not pressure, that feeling and connection are safer than they used to be. Moments that should feel nourishing often register as flat, distant, or strangely incomplete. Even in happiness, there can be an underlying vigilance, a sense that something is missing or that something will soon go wrong. This is not ingratitude, it is the nervous system maintaining distance as a form of protection. Functional freeze is the body staying present enough to function, but distant enough not to feel too much. Functional freeze forms when early environments required a child to remain alert, self-contained, or emotionally guarded. If closeness carried unpredictability, disappointment, intrusion, or emotional absence, the nervous system learned a quiet solution: stay engaged but not open. Over time, this becomes a way of being. The adult may move through the world with a persistent sense of outside looking in. There can be chronic difficulty settling into the moment. Even during connection, celebration, or calm, part of the nervous system remains braced, scanning, waiting, withholding full presence. This is why many people in functional freeze describe never quite belonging, never fully landing, never being able to rest into experience. The body is not failing to enjoy life, it's ensuring that the moment doesn't make you vulnerable. Functional freeze is often confused with dissociation or depression because all three involve reduced emotional availability, but they are not identical nervous system experiences. Dissociation is a more pronounced departure from present moment awareness, a drifting, fogging, or leaving of the body when overwhelm is too high. Depression often involves global shutdown, a collapse of energy, motivation, and pleasure. Functional freeze sits differently. Functional freeze sits differently. Here, energy is not absent, it is held. Life continues, but from behind a thin veil. There may be productivity, humour, intelligence, even warmth, alongside a persistent sense of distance, mutedness, or emotional incompletion, where dissociation disconnects from reality and depression dims it. Functional freeze stays engaged while keeping the heart slightly out of reach. One of the most painful aspects of functional freeze is not numbness, it's partialness. People often describe feeling present but not inside their life, being with others but not fully with them, enjoying moments but not being able to receive them, sensing meaning without being able to inhabit it. There is often a background grief that is hard to name, a quiet loneliness that exists even in company, a sense of being perpetually on the edge of something rather than within it. This ache is not pathology, it is the nervous system remembering a time when being fully here did not feel safe, and it is also the place where healing begins, not by forcing presence, but by slowly teaching the body that it no longer has to stand outside the moment to survive it. Functional freeze is often mistaken for personality. I'm just not very emotional. I'm independent. I function better when I'm busy. I don't need much. This is just how I am. We fill the quiet with stimulation. We manage discomfort with distraction. We mistake numbness for calm. We confuse self-containment with strength. One of the most common ways functional freeze is managed is through proximity without intimacy. Being around people, staying busy, keeping company without being emotionally met. For a moment, the system feels less alone, more anchored, more normal. But the nervous system never truly settles because what it is seeking isn't stimulation or distraction, it's safety, attunement, and emotional contact. So the freeze remains, but life continues from behind glass. Another typical way functional freeze hides is through relationships that never fully arrive, situationships, breadcrumbing, emotional proximity without emotional commitment. The nervous system stays engaged, waiting, scanning, hoping, interpreting. Rare moments of warmth are called connection. Potential is called intimacy. Crumbs are called enough. Not because the person is foolish, but because the body learned early to survive on very little. Functional freeze doesn't always look like numbness. Sometimes it looks like staying in bonds that don't hold you, calling absence depth, calling inconsistency chemistry. And letting go doesn't only mean losing a person, it means grieving the safety and love the nervous system was still trying to earn. It means grieving the home the body kept trying to find in someone who could never offer it. There is also the vulnerability of functional freeze. For someone whose nervous system learned that closeness brings danger, emotional distance can feel like safety, low demand can feel like respect, emotional absence can feel like peace until it isn't. And when the emptiness surfaces, when the ache leaks back in, when these connections fail to nourish, the system doesn't question the bond, it questions the need. Functional freeze erodes the self without collapse. There is no crisis, there is no contraction. Emotional range narrows, desire softens, expression becomes cautious. The system prioritizes stability over vitality, not because you are broken, but because the body learned that safety required less of you, and over time, something essential goes quiet. From the outside, life looks settled, and yet internally something has gone quiet. Not dramatic unhappiness, but a steady sense of emotional distance. The relationship continues, life functions, but the body is no longer fully here. There is less spontaneity, less emotional availability, not because love is gone, but because the nervous system has learned to stay contained. This is functional freeze inside relationship, being present without arriving, together without being met, safe enough to stay, not safe enough to open. Sometimes the nervous system doesn't choose change. It chooses containment. It chooses predictability over presence, stability over emotional risk. So relationships are endured, not because they are nourishing, but because they feel survivable. Needs soften, longing lowers its voice. Life continues together, but something essential remains outside the room. This is functional freeze inside commitment. The questions rarely arrive loudly. They circle. Is this my life now? Will it ever change? Am I asking for too much? Is this the best it gets? And because nothing is wrong enough, the nervous system turns the questions inward. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I should want less. Maybe this is just adulthood. So the questions don't get answered. They get lived. They settle into the background, become the shape of the relationship. The nervous system recognizes this environment: emotional presence without attunement, togetherness without being met. For a system shaped by emotional neglect or abandonment, this is not absence, this is familiarity. The body learned early how to live without response, how to stay in connection without being emotionally held, how to survive proximity without attunement. So when adult relationships carry the same emotional distance, the nervous system doesn't register danger, it registers home. Expression quiets, longing softens, and the relationship begins to feel like an echo, not because nothing is there, but because nothing is answering back. After loss, the nervous system often doesn't collapse. It contains. It keeps life moving by narrowing experience. Grief doesn't move, it settles. Pleasure dulls, sensation quiets, the body stops reaching for taste, warmth or comfort. Food is eaten but not received. Moments happen but don't touch. The nervous system learns how to continue without letting anything all the way in. Functional freeze after loss is the body surviving by staying half open. Functional freeze, abandonment and emotional neglect are often spoken about as if they are the same thing. They are not. They are distinct nervous system experiences, but they frequently overlap, layer, and reinforce one another. This is why functional freeze can feel confusing, hard to locate, and difficult to shift. Understanding the difference matters, not to label yourself, but to understand what your nervous system adapted to in order to survive. My needs didn't matter. Emotional neglect forms when a child's feelings, needs, or inner world were consistently unseen, minimised, or unsupported, even if caregivers were physically present or well-intentioned. What's missing isn't love in theory, but attunement in practice. The child learns, don't expect emotional response, don't express too much, don't need loudly. The nervous system imprints, my inner world is alone. The adult echoes often become difficulty identifying needs, discomfort receiving care, chronic self-containment, emotional flatness, or quiet withdrawal. Emotional neglect is often the soil from which functional freeze grows. If I need, I might lose you. Abandonment is not only physical leaving, it includes emotional withdrawal, unpredictability, disappearance, or the repeated threat of disconnection. The nervous system learns closeness is unstable, love can vanish, attachment requires vigilance. The nervous system imprints, I must manage myself to stay connected. And in adulthood, this often doesn't look like panic. It looks like functional freeze. Needs soften, expression quiets, longing is carefully contained. The system learns to stay in relationship without fully arriving in it. Abandonment wounds don't always create anxiety. They often create a nervous system that stays but doesn't quite open. I learned not to want. Functional freeze forms when the inner child realises that feeling fully does not lead to being met. It leads to overwhelm, disappointment, or emotional absence. So instead of reaching, the nervous system adapts. It narrows desire, it softens hope, it learns how to stay present without opening. The nervous system imprints, it is safer not to need. The adult echoes often become emotional flatness or distance, difficulty enjoying or receiving, staying functional while feeling absent, a quiet loss of vitality that's hard to name. Functional freeze is not numbness. It is the inner child's very intelligent way of surviving the absence of emotional response by switching off the parts that kept hoping. Many people carry both the inner child's longing and functional freeze's containment. The child learned that emotional connection was inconsistent, absent, or costly. So the nervous system adapted. Functional freeze becomes the way of staying without opening. The adult may want closeness but not feel safe inside it. Be in relationships but not fully arrive. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your system learned how to survive connection. If functional freeze is treated as a personality trait, it won't shift. If emotional distance is treated as strength, it won't soften. If childhood adaptation is minimised because nothing bad happened, the pattern remains intact. Healing begins when we understand what was missing, what felt unsafe, what the inner child learned, what the nervous system organised itself around to survive. Functional freeze doesn't ease through effort or insight alone. It softens when the body learns that feeling is no longer dangerous, that connection can be present without cost, and that aliveness does not have to threaten attachment. It softens when the inner child finally experiences what was missing, emotional presence that is safe, responsive, and steady. Healing functional freeze does not begin by trying to be more alive. It begins by becoming more honest about where we are not, by noticing the moments we disappear inside activity, the ways we hover just outside experience, the subtle holding back of joy, grief, longing, or need. Not to force them open, but to meet them with safety. Freeze does not melt through intensity. It releases through gentleness, through relational presence, through regulated contact, through slow experiences of being here without cost. And slowly the nervous system learns something new, that the moment no longer needs to be survived, it can be inhabited. These strategies are not failures. They are intelligent adaptations formed in response to early relational uncertainty, but they come at a cost. They keep you functional but frozen, because freeze doesn't melt when we avoid needing. It melts when we feel safe enough to feel. Safe connection is not something you decide to do. It is something the nervous system has to experience. For those shaped by emotional neglect or abandonment, connection was never neutral. It required vigilance, adaptation, or emotional containment. So functional freeze formed as a way of staying without opening. Healing does not happen by forcing vulnerability or trying harder. It happens when the nervous system begins to experience contact that does not require bracing. Functional freeze softens slowly, not through intensity, but through consistency, through moments where expression does not lead to rupture, where presence does not require protection. This is how emotional movement returns, not all at once, but safely. The nervous system learns in increments. One emotional movement that doesn't cost connection, one boundary held without withdrawal, one truth spoken and not punished, one need expressed and met, one moment of presence without bracing. This is how functional freeze softens, not through insight, but through experience, not intellectually, but somatically. This is not fast work, and it's not linear, and it does not ask you to become someone else. It asks you to return gently to emotional movement, to sensation, to presence, and to discover that feeling does not have to threaten safety, that aliveness can exist alongside connection, not at its expense. Chronic functional freeze is not a flaw. It is often the after effect of emotional neglect, abandonment, or early relational uncertainty. When feeling was costly, the nervous system learned to contain. What now feels like something wrong is often something that once kept you safe. Growth reduces containment. As awareness deepens, the nervous system begins to soften the freeze. What you once managed unconsciously, you now feel consciously. This can create a painful gap. You are no longer numbing, but your system may not yet feel safe enough to fully open. This phase is not regression, it's transition. Functional freeze often feels louder as it loosens, because the body is beginning to come back online, and that takes time. Functional freeze can soften, not by forcing feeling, but by relearning safety in the body. Healing doesn't happen through trying harder to open. It happens when the nervous system experiences slowly and repeatedly that emotion can move without overwhelm, needs can exist without cost, boundaries don't threaten connection, presence doesn't require bracing. This is nervous system work. It unfolds gradually, and it does not ask you to become someone else. Functional freeze eases when the body learns it no longer has to protect itself from living, when the body learns it can come back inside experience. If watching this video has resonated with you, my trauma-informed 6-week immersion combines hypnotherapy, somatic practice, and inner child work to restore regulation and rebuild self-trust. It teaches your body that safety no longer depends on control, that love and calm can coexist. Please feel welcome to book a discovery call. I work in person and online. You don't have to carry this alone. You're not too much. You're not broken. You're becoming. Thanks for watching.